Hey there, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brittany,
I'm Maria.
and this is the Be More podcast. Welcome back.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, if you watched last week's episode, it's not going to be like that part two. It's going to be back to our normal programming.
Yes. Yep. I feel like that was like a Twilight Zone episode.
I
Just
love. I also loved editing that. Not because I like actually had things to like input and like edit or whatever. Only because there was a moment in the very beginning where I was like, Brittany's gonna be mute today, and it was just like you going off for like 2 hours.
I got so frustrated. I was not in a good spot for us to be doing that, but it's
It was a
okay.
no. Me and
It
Ashley
brought
thought it
out
was
the
hysterical.
it brought out the and as I'm listening to it, guys, if you go back and listen to this episode, I realize that me on a good day can like Ashley and Maria are full on just like playing up how funny they think it is. And because of the headspace that I was in, I could not look at it like that. And as I was re-listening to the episode, I was like, oh my God. I was like, because it's funny because I'm listening to the two of you and I'm totally understanding like where you're coming from and the parody of all of it. And I was just not playing into that. I was so frustrated.
It was fine. No, I mean, me and Ash thought it was hysterical. So, I mean, if you
But I
haven't
think
listened
that
to it, go
made
back
it
one episode.
so much like it did
I
make it.
know it was hysterical.
And then I was like, oh my God, Brittany, it was a perfect example of like when you're too close to like your feels that you take everything in life too seriously because you
Yeah,
don't know how to detach yourself from it.
so funny.
That's where I was last week and it totally came out. So I hope that that wasn't the first episode you've listened to, but if you saw different side of Brittany, it's a part of me, it's a part of who I am, and I definitely still stand by the things that I said, but it was not the like you can tell this is why I do the work that I do in working
Yeah,
on my mental health because when I'm not good, it's not good.
it was funny though.
So
That's all I had to say about last week's episode.
Oy vey. So this week I think talking about, having it be that I was definitely dealing with some stuff last week. And there's some stuff that has been coming to both of our attention. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about things that we normally talk about in this podcast, which is, mental health. No surprise for anybody there.
Right.
But we wanted to talk about it in an everyday life aspect a little bit. Um,
hmm
because I think that so much of the time there's a lot of awareness around like we talk about mental health a little bit more, I guess, fluidly and openly,
hmm
but so much of the time it's still connected to like bigger issues, right? Things that people see as like, oh, you actually have a imbalance of chemicals in your brain. Like that's that is one more extreme end of the spectrum of dealing with mental health, but we deal with our mental health every single day. And that was something that we wanted to be able to talk about it and like our responses to that, our responses to the world are things that
hmm Just
can
personal
influence us.
experiences, I guess. Right.
Yeah, I want to talk about that definitely too. Um, so I mean, I feel comfortable. Like I would literally, guys, 20 minutes ago, just sent Maria a bunch of like word. I don't know. I guess I'll start. I'll
Start
start.
from the beginning.
I don't know what the beginning is
That's
though.
true.
Um, okay, so let me start with this. I I'll start with my personal experience. Is that cool with you? And then you can share
Yeah.
whatever you want to share.
hmm
So I'm gonna stay super relevant in my personal experience and tell you guys like a little bit about where I was last week because as somebody who is talking about this stuff constantly and is doing a lot of mindset work, I still have struggles and sometimes those struggles get bigger than I want them to be. And I have
Yeah, they just manifest in your other aspects of life.
yeah, I have not good days and it doesn't mean that like I'm different. It just like that something's wrong with me. It just means that like I'm having to deal with other stuff. So let me tell you where I was last week, and I'm gonna be totally like full disclosure about this because I think we need to talk about this more. Um, I used to have panic attacks, and they were things that started in like 2018, 2019. And anybody who's listening to this who doesn't really know this about me. This might be news, but I did, and they were not fun, and they were physical manifestations. And being somebody who is very like body aware, and now knowing, being able to identify them, I know when I'm about to be there. And I haven't experienced it in a while, but I've been very stressed about work and life, and a lot of it's been like expectations versus reality and the pressures that we put on ourselves around that. And I started to get to the point where my stress was just always filling my mind so much that it was overflowing into my body, and I would get like these aches and pains in like my body, like just not being able to release tension. And then it would like, then it started getting into my eyeballs, which that's a new thing for me. I think it's because I'm on screen so much now.
Yeah.
But like my eyeballs would start hurting, and I could feel the muscles around my eyes.
Yeah, that's worse.
And it gets to a point where it becomes almost paralyzing. Like the tension builds up so much that you don't feel like you have control over those limbs. And then you start to feel kind of like exhausted and like almost numb and tingly, but like your body's tremoring. So that's what I started feeling last week. And that was a sign for me, like, oh my, like, we need to stop. We need to do something about this. And I went on for like a solid 2 or 3 days experiencing those things before I actually did anything about it, which was not good. But it can be really scary when you're facing it and you still have shit you have to do.
Yeah, the grind doesn't stop for panic attack.
Exactly, which is so frustrating. So I didn't get to the point where I full on felt like I was, you know, in it, but there were definitely a lot of like the physical manifestations for me that I know come. Usually then it leads to like me hyperventilating and like then like a lot of crying. And then the thing that sucks about them the most is that it doesn't actually help you get over the stuff that's in, like having a panic attack is your body just responding to all the stress that you've held on to. It doesn't actually move you past the stress or help you manage the stress. It's still in there. It's just that your body actually like hit the point where it's like the volcano erupts and it has to let go of it. And if you guys listen to our episode on like burnout and like the cycle of dealing with emotions, like when your body doesn't get to do that, that's usually when you lead to having a physical experience like a panic attack.
Right.
So even though like my body dealt with it, like my brain was still carrying it, and I was just doing it to myself again until I finally like full disclosure, I finally like stopped doing things and told myself I needed to stop doing things, and like took a bath and read a book and listened to some classical music, and then like I felt so much better. And then the next day, I just like really hard cried for a little bit and started meditation practice again, and like in a very different structured way. And now I feel like myself again.
That's good. You literally just had to go through the cycle of everything, whatever you're dealing with.
For sure. I just had to like, it's funny because I love meditation because we constantly take in so much input and our minds are constantly going and going and going. Just like on your computer, unless you can delete stuff all you want, but unless you actually go into your trash bin and you really delete it from your hard drive, your brain's the same way. And sometimes you don't have a lot of ways to understand, first, that you need to do that, and second, how to do it effectively for yourself. And that's what I really need to do. I need to get all that. I put so much good stuff in my brain on purpose, but sometimes it becomes overwhelming. Like I got to the point where I was like, I couldn't listen to the talks that I like to listen to. I couldn't have the conversations that usually help me. Like there was too much in there, and putting in more wasn't going to do anything. I needed to find a way to actively release all of the crap that I was holding on to. And I am not somebody I'm a normal person, an everyday human being, and I deal with these things. And there are so many of us, 1 in 5 Americans are dealing with this level of stress and anxiety and having to deal with our emotional shit. So yeah, that was my most recent experience.
Oh, okay. I mean, I can never pinpoint a panic attack.
Mm.
Well, I mean, sometimes I can, but they're so like I don't get to that, in movies and TV shows, like hyperventilating, like breaking down, like crying, all that stuff. Like I don't like that's not my panic attack. My sisters have seen me once in public have one, and it's the complete
Mm.
opposite. It's more like disassociating, where I'm just like I don't want it. Don't even perceive me as a person right now. Like don't even like look at me like I'm not doing anything right now. Like just don't. Like it's just more of a, and I don't feel anything. I go numb as
Mhm.
opposed to. I mean, there are some points that get to me where I do like start like my heart rate's up and whatever, but more or less like I sometimes don't even know I'm having one,
Mm.
and I think that's scarier. I think because it's like my body's always tense, which usually means I'm always stressed out. So like that's like just a norm for me. So like for you, right? Like if your body tenses up, you're like, all right, like something's happening. But like for me, like I really couldn't tell if this is a minor or major panic attack. It just manifests in a different way per person. So it's like very hard to define. But I know I'm not in a good headspace if for prime example, I always bring up like if I can't take in new media, like you can't take in your talks or whatever, like I can't if I can't physically watch a new TV show or something, and I go back to the same like TV shows, YouTube videos, songs, whatever, like that usually means like I'm not in a good headspace because my brain is full. Like there's nothing there for me to input anymore. Um, and something has to give, and usually like I it gets to the point where it's too late where I'm like, oh, I this is night 5 of me watching the same damn YouTube video. I should probably do something, like, So it's like it's easy to call out. It's harder to do something about it, especially if
Yeah.
you're so mentally ill and not stable. And it doesn't help that I have seasonal because the winter months are harder for me to deal with this shit, but also I am dealing with tax season. So it's like my brain's already full from work that I just make an excuse to just like work through it. And then usually around April, May, once everything's done with tax season, that's when I have a full on like breakdown because then everything catches up and it's like clockwork. And like I've been dealing with this for the past like 6, 7 years now, but there's no easy solution. Every year is different. I've noticed like there's literally like I can do the same remedy I did last year, but it's not gonna be this. I'm not the same person as last year.
Yeah.
So like for me, it's a constant thing where I don't like have like a certain like. It's easy when it's like I'm watching the same YouTube video for the past 5 days, but like besides that, like I could just be having minor panic attacks like 24/7. I really couldn't tell you.
I think that's so we've like lived different experiences, right? Like I am a very bodily aware person, so it makes sense that I have a very physical experience,
Yeah.
right? But like I also, not that I kind of recall, I've never I feel like I've never allowed myself to have anything happen in public. Um
Uh,
so
mine's very like if it's in public, like mine's like nothing. It's not like again, I'm not screaming, crying, hyperventilating. It's more like I'm just disassociating.
and I feel like in terms of the like and survival skills, like I feel like especially when you're in public, you're probably thinking to yourself, don't show, like do not have a moment right now, because you're that's in our ego brain, our survival brain is going to say you're going to show that you're vulnerable and there's a lot of people around you, um
Yeah,
or
and also a cultural
ahead of
thing too.
yourself. And
It's probably just
totally,
culture, like I mean,
that's
again, I
why
don't
yeah.
I highly doubt that like a first generation Asian American is more like if they're having a panic attack, it's probably in private.
Oh yeah, I mean,
And like not even in front of
people,
like and not even in front of like just family friends, like we're just like don't show vulnerability
I
period.
I feel like, and I don't think anybody else in my family would, like if we're going up the hierarchy of generations,
Yeah.
even use the word panic attack, or
Mm-hmm.
like be able to define something with.
Right, it's so foreign. It's a foreign concept.
I think my what I've seen from my family in response to having something like that happen is either outbursts of anger
Yes.
or and like storm off because it's easier to do that and then just sit with your anger versus all of the other emotions, or
Mm-hmm.
that shut down, closed. I don't
Yeah,
have
it's typical.
any connection to seeing anybody be able to really express that in a familial setting, let alone in a public setting. Which is why I don't know what I still can't cry to people, but and feel comfortable doing it anyway. But maybe if you're listening to this, you have different experiences than the both of us. But
Oh, I will say one thing though. In public settings, if I do have a panic attack or something, or if I just have any emotion, it's usually anger, and that's a generational thing too.
it's also the most
It's the most it's the
acceptable
easiest.
emotion in our society. Anger is the most acceptable emotion for
Yeah, it's so easy. It's
because
so
it's power.
especially like in our area of like New Jersey, New York, like everyone's angry.
Yeah, you wonder why?
Like yeah, everyone's fucking angry. Like
Look at the way we live.
it's pretty normal to walk, you know, in a grocery store or whatever, and so like every other person's probably just looking angry. And that's
Yeah.
just like us, like our like we have a resting bitch face like in this fucking area. But for me, like it's so and for everyone around me, it's I feel like it's just so easy when you're out in public if, instead of having a panic attack to just seem angry.
Yeah,
Because that could also be like me having a panic attack. It's just like I'm just fucking irritated, which is
and
also a sign
right.
of anxiety and stress.
Yeah, and a panic attack really just is you have an influx of emotions and things that are coming to the surface and it's just overwhelming and it's your emotions that you haven't dealt with attacking you or you things you don't know how to deal with literally
Right.
attacking you. It it makes sense for the output when you're trying to keep yourself safe and manage what's going on inside your head. You need space and time to do that. And if you feel like there's too much going on around you, anger makes the most sense, right? And it's frustrating that anger is like the data against emotions tells us that anger is the most widely acceptable emotion for people to portray, that people
Yeah,
will
in
see
public.
anger and know how to respond to it or understand is what the like the meaning behind it is, but people don't. And I mean I get that. I get I I've seen that and I've felt that, and I I think that as somebody who's been around it enough, I feel comfortable in managing somebody who is sad or crying and um but I know people who don't feel comfortable with that. And what's really frustrating about that situation is that the way that I would want to respond is how I would want someone to respond to me if I'm doing that, and not everybody wants that. And we don't
Correct.
talk about communicating what we need in those moments. So it just makes it a whole just cluster monster of
And like that is something and like that is something that I've struggled with. I mean, it's a constant battle of like do they need help or do they just want to vent?
mm,
You know, like cuz that's also a thing like with communication and just like dealing with your the people around you's emotions, they don't deal with it the same way as you do. So like it gets
yeah.
frustrating for me. It was frustrating for me for the longest time, but now like it's still a struggle to understand, but like with just the actual common knowledge of that, I think has made my mental sanity better.
Yeah, because then you're less worried about negative consequences of having some type of action, especially if the action
Right.
you're making is intended to be helpful. Um,
Exactly. It's like the lack of communication. It's a lot because again, we can all identify if someone's mad, happy, content, not indifferent, like you know, just you know, emotions. But like the action to remedy or uplift that is like lost.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
So I want to, before we start going deeper into these like things, I want to share
mhm.
all the stuff that at 5 minutes before we got on this call, I vent voice to texted Maria.
Mm-hmm.
because I think that it is going to lay a good foundation for what we're going to talk about moving forward. Um, and it'll give you my perspective on this, and then totally Maria chime in. And I'm very
Mm-hmm.
curious for people who are listening if anybody sees this in a similar way. Um, and I'm literally just going to read what I voice to texted to Maria because I knew if I got it, I needed to get it out in that moment, and I knew I was going
Yeah.
to remember it to have the
Yeah.
conversation.
You're good.
But I, as a person over the last few months, experiencing the things that I've been experiencing and talking to people who I've been talking to about their experiences with mental health, what frustrates me about all of this is like we just had a very, casual, like matter of fact conversation of being like, this happens. Like we're dealing with this. We know that. That's fact. And there's so much fact around the existence of mental health and mental illness. And we talk about raising awareness all the time that it exists. But calling attention to something that exists and not doing anything about it, this is the analogy. I love analogies. Is as if we were going to say that there is a giant sinkhole in the center of our town in the middle of all of the roads that we all need to walk on, but we just continue to either drive around them or drive right into them instead of doing any work to actually address the problem.
Right.
And that's frustrating to me. Like a lot of the other major societal issues that we discuss on this podcast, it's not good enough to just raise awareness because that it is an initial step that's needed, but something has to keep happening after that. So for me, I believe that the way that we address this problem is that we're educating our young people about the signs of dealing with whether it's everyday mental health struggles or things that maybe feel a little bit more in the realms of like biological imbalances um, within our brains. But it starts with educating that these things happen to every single one of us because, and like you can do something about it. So it doesn't become a bigger issue in the future. We need to talk more about the fact that trauma isn't something that happens only in devastating areas that we see readily accessible on like the news or in movies or TV shows. It's something that can happen to us daily, and especially as we're growing up, we experience traumas constantly. Like when someone calls you out or you get embarrassed or you question your identity, like those are traumatic moments for you emotionally, and or like not feeling good enough, which is something that I experienced a lot. Those traumas can bubble into bigger things that fuel our anxiety or our depression, even if we don't see that they're happening. And this is the thing that really gets me, and we've talked about this before. We need to talk about the fact that we are emotional creatures and that the things that happen to us influence us and impact who we are and how we move forward. And the way that we're set up to function in our society, because our society wants us to be the opposite. The way that we experience emotions are the opposite of the way that we need to respond to the things that happen in our everyday life, especially in professional settings. Um, it shouldn't be something that we only start to deal with or address after the fact and it becomes too big to handle. Like, oh, you're having anxiety, like you're having panic attacks. You should go to therapy now and learn how to deal with and cope with all of these things. Or like you now have it, you're experiencing addiction. So yeah, I think that therapy shouldn't be the only place that we learn the skills we need to manage our emotions if we're emotional beings. And if this happens to every one of us, we all experience. I'm sorry, there's not a single person who doesn't experience emotion, even if it is just anger that you know. We all need to learn how to manage them and manage the headspace that holds all of them. And this imbalance that exists in the way that we think and the way that we function and the way that we're designed as emotional creatures and the way that we're asked to function as robots in society makes us have to shield ourselves or push down the things that we don't like about ourselves, which just makes them bigger, and it makes a bigger health, like a mental health issue to process. So that's in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, but
And on all of this.
in a nutshell, in a novel. No, there's one thing that prompted like a memory or whatever. I read on the internet, I don't know, a few months ago or something, that you know, trauma is usually dictated as like the bad things that happen throughout your life, right?
Mm.
But there was something where I read where trauma is actually also the things that didn't happen in your life.
Mm.
So
Mm. Mm.
Brittany's drinking water and snapping. That's why she's snapping.
Oh, oh
So
boy.
so for, you know, for example, like if you had a bad childhood, like yeah, that's also trauma, but also if you're missing the good aspects of what a stereotypical childhood is, that's also trauma because you're missing that.
We talk about trauma. I mean, it sounds like a really like it's word, right? We talk about it all the time as it's this capital T of a word, right? And it's only if it's this capital T of a word. And we don't normalize the fact that, and I guess I'll put this in a physical experience. You can, this is going to get intense. I don't know why my brain went to this, but I get the point. You can be like impaled by a sword, right? Wait, I'm just gonna put it in like a medical aspect. Sorry, guys. But you can be impaled by something that goes clear through your body and comes out on the other side of your stomach. And that's trauma to your skin and your body, right?
Hmm.
Or you can get a paper cut that is still trauma to your skin and your body.
Right.
And different types of responses are required. But at the end of the day, I've seen this as like in studies, which baffles me. When you are impaled by something, you're very likely to be like, okay, we have to do the work, we have to clean this wound, we have to like heal you, all of that stuff. There have been medical cases where someone getting a paper cut and not cleaning the wound and dealing with the paper cut led to death because of
Yeah.
infection
Infections and
and that's the way that we should be addressing mental health. Traumas happen every day because we are emotional creatures and we're constantly dealing with things. A little feeling of a paper cut of like your mental state when not addressed can be more dangerous than something that floors you or shocks you or pulls the floor out underneath you. It
mhm.
all still needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree completely. Because I mean, uh, it's like the snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just tiny, you know, any tiny thing can just lead it to a bigger problem down the road.
For sure.
Hmm.
For sure. I know for myself, I had a really hard time. What frustrates me about mental health, there are two sides to this, I feel like, that are annoying and getting in our way. Is that one side of it is, and I used to really feel this way, and I still sometimes check myself with it, is the stigma around being somebody who openly admits to having issues with mental health.
Hmm.
And then the other side of it is actually, literally, my brain just shut off and I don't.
Well,
Oh, sorry, sorry,
that's
sorry.
mental health in a
So wait,
nutshell.
sorry, the insides and the outside, right? When you are inside the bubble of having mental health, you can feel like an outsider and having to disclose that information to people who live on the outside of the bubble, right? You don't want to necessarily share it. It's very vulnerable. People can judge you, all that stuff. But another thing that I struggled with on the inside of the circle was being able to sit next to somebody who, especially after hearing about the expectations, quote unquote, around what mental health was supposed to look like, um, being able to sit next to somebody who, you know, had something just catastrophically devastating happen in their life compared to the things that I felt like I was going through, and be able to not have that like disgusting comparison mindset of being like, well, that's trauma, but this is trauma too. And being, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
hierarchies of trauma, which is gross and frustrating and annoying. Um, but it's true. So it's hard to live on the inside of being that, because that comparison and feeling like, well, I can't really talk about this because I didn't go through what that person went through or this person went through to like have space to talk about it. But the
Hmm.
truth of the matter is, the stuff that we're talking about right now is the stuff that's relatable to the everyday person, because so many people are experiencing things that are triggering, like that become traumas. Um, just the trauma of being human, right? You
Yeah, of
have your
living.
own others behind you, and I have my own others behind them, and every person that we talk to is gonna have their own others. But the, the inherent trauma that comes with being an emotional creature living in this world we share and is still a part of mental health.
Right, and like even if someone had a catastrophic event happen, you're anyone. Yeah, I hate the hierarchy of trauma.
Yeah, do you get what I'm saying though? Like,
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's
fine talking
it's
about it
like
at first.
you know, you hear all these horror stories on the news, and then you know, I'm just complaining about my daily life, but also that's the same trauma. As
Right.
in, like, trauma shouldn't be a hierarchy. It should just be like a blob of like
Yeah.
here's trauma. Everyone is dealing with it. Everyone is valid in their trauma. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to. It's because some people get into the whole one-upping game
Mm-hmm.
where someone has to
And
one up
that
your
exists in
struggle.
mental health too, which is gross.
Exactly, which is brutal, which is absolutely brutal because like, I mean, when I was younger, like I would just like vent and then someone would be like, "Oh, but then I XYZ," and then it's just like a whole like comforting thing between the two of you as opposed to just like talking, getting it out and
Yes.
saying, "I'm
And
sorry, that sucks," and then just like leaving it that.
that is
But again, that's a skill that
such
people
a
need to learn.
right. That's
That's a
such a thing. And I've been in plenty of those. This is part of this is how you learn who you can and should talk to, and maybe who's
correct.
not ready to be a part of that conversation. And for me, when I was going through all of this initially, I had a lot of anger towards the people that I felt like I couldn't talk to or weren't listening, um, because I wasn't getting what I needed. And I saw them as people in my life who should know better, right? Who were older than me or were somebody that I looked up to or like so
Yeah.
that was a really frustrating experience, but the truth of the matter that I had to come to realize like everything else is that everybody has their own experiences with these things, and some people don't have the awareness, the knowledge, the education to know how to manage these situations, and I had to allow that. And then I also started to learn that when people do that, when you share your major thing that was like and frustrating and you needed to talk about, and another person is like, oh, and this thing happened to me, and you're like, okay, well,
Cool.
I need you to
Thanks.
help me talk about this. They see that as a moment to bond with you, right? And having a similar experience.
Correct.
They
Yes.
don't realize that I just need you to listen to what I'm saying and
Yeah.
help me figure this out. And like, great, if you had an experience, then maybe you know something that I don't know and you can help me with it. I don't need you to tell me about your experience. And that is something that, especially with those people in my life who I would go to, I've either learned to just not talk to them about those things, which, sucks, but, or I should say, I've learned to first say, I'm dealing with something. I need to talk about it. I need you to listen. And I need you to give me some support with it. I
Yeah.
don't need, I'm sure you've had some type of experience like this, but I need you to give me 5 or 10 seconds.
I don't need a whole life story.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is why, again, we've talked about this before. This is also why therapy exists. Because not
That's
every
what therapists do.
right, that is a therapist who walk in and their job is to
Certain like
space.
talk therapy. Like I don't know anything else but talk therapy.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, movement
CBT.
therapy and like other forms of therapy, their job is to honestly, you do a lot of the work in talk therapy too. It's just
Yeah, correct.
when it comes to talk therapy, they're creating an environment for you to be able to do exactly what we just talked about,
Literally,
talking through
literally
it.
it's you maybe 45 minutes of talking and them giving you 10 seconds
Yeah.
of
So
being like this and you're like, "Oh, okay. How about this?" And it's just like, "No, how about this?" Like
another thing that I've
therapy's brilliant.
so I was at I was at the point when I was talking about my personal experience from the beginning of the episode where I was kind of like noticing for myself like I need to go back to therapy. Like I should really take some action to go back to therapy. And so I've told you about the experiences that I've had with therapy, and
Mhm.
when I have finally found a therapist that I was going to see consistently, like they like up and had to leave, right? And then COVID happened and I was like, okay, cool. So even behind this, you might not always have that as a resource. It's possible, right? And for me, I now also have a little bit of a stigma against like finding that person, because what, like, now I have to reinvest into this person and they have to get to know me, and like I have to find the, it's like a lot of mental gymnastics. I'm going to use that term all the time, by the way. Ashley, thank you. Um, Trying to get yourself in a good spot where you're actually working through the stuff that you need to be working through. Like you have to make it that space again, and it's that alone can be dramatic. So what I learned and realized for myself, oddly enough, through like religious spiritual practice, is that I I don't always need someone else to give me the answer, because I've come to the point where I know that I have the answers.
Hmm.
But when there's so much stuff in my brain,
It's hard to
I
decipher
can't
anything.
filter it out.
Yeah.
So I've started with my meditation practice, I've started like talking, like religion talks about it all the time, like talking to God, right? Like
Yeah.
praying, right? And like saying the things you need to say. I noticed that when I'm somebody who talks out loud, clearly.
Hmm.
Obviously, I have tons of issues against speaking. I noticed that when I get really stressed or anxious, I don't talk at all. Like, I don't want to say anything at all. And like, even talking to myself out loud.
Hmm.
So I've also started practicing with the intent of I'm still talking to somebody, right? I'm still talking to something. And there could be a way that I get a response, because I believe in all of that.
Hmm.
But me just putting it out there and getting it out helps me clear the space to get the, like, the
Hmm.
solution that I need.
Yeah, and like it's funny enough that when we're younger, praying just seems like if you're raised in you know a religious household and you went through the religious practice or whatever, like praying and going to church or going to the mosque or a temple or whatever just seems like another chore that like okay you have to
Mm-hmm.
talk to God or a higher power. But the older you get and the more that you know about the world, it's like oh that was a way of like meditating and like manifesting and like figuring out your issues like
Yeah,
when the
that was
older
the original therapy.
correct. And like when the older generations, like in the Filipino culture, are like just go pray to God and everything will be solved. It's like you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
It's more like you're. I don't want to say like I don't have like a God complex, but like it's you. Like
Well,
you are
I mean,
literally you have the answer somewhere.
right. If the
Like you
and
said,
this is where, like I've been telling you, I've been coming back to religion because I'm
yeah,
understanding it now
yeah. We're both understanding.
from
We've
a
gone.
bigger perspective, from the bigger
We
perspective that's intended.
correct. Like we're not in the nitty gritty, like, read this chapter of the Bible to get this answer.
Right.
Like we're more like, this is the intention of
The
praying.
greater intelligence behind it.
Correct.
I
Like
can
this is
totally see that.
I agree completely. Yeah, I think we were
And
in the same
with
journey.
what you're saying, with what you're saying, right, is there's that belief of if you come from part of that higher power, you have a part of it in you. This is actually a big part
Yeah.
of like chakras and working through your chakras too, because that third eye is literally the belief in that, like you're connecting to that higher power that you have within you.
Hmm.
Um, so so yeah, I this is kind of tapping into like things that we use to help ourselves. But if talking to yourself out loud helps you
I
in
do
some
it.
way, yeah, just do it.
That's what that's usually like if I'm sorry if I because now I live alone, like there's really literally no one to talk to. Like I talk to myself like when I need to like get shit done and
Yeah,
like a pep talk, I'm like, all right, you need to get up. Like
for sure.
we need
And
to
I
do
think,
something.
and this is not to negate or say that like this can replace therapy. No,
No.
I I found this out for myself by doing it, and I'm using it as coping mechanisms for myself that are helping me.
Right.
But the reason why we go to therapy, and why, if you were to try some of like these things and it still wasn't helping you, you go to therapy to learn about different coping practices and different mindset shifts that you can have for yourself. And I only can get myself to here, and doesn't mean I'll be successful at it next time or the time after that, but I only can get myself to this place where I know how to shift and manage things again,
Hmm.
because I've learned the foundations of doing that, and
Correct.
like by going through therapy and being aware of mental health and trying
Hmm.
to be an advocate and constantly learning and educating myself, which are all the things that I think we need to do on a larger scale
Agreed.
around this topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know we wanted to talk about the Jerry Lewis situation. I don't want to sit on it for forever, but guys, I brought. If you're not familiar with Jeremiah Lewis, his last name is Lewis, right?
I believe so.
I think it is too.
Well, in any case, he's the guy from Cheer.
Yes.
Which I spoiler alert, it's not spoiler alert actually. Don't give me any spoilers about season 2 because I did not
I'm
watch it.
not. I will not.
Okay, great.
But the reason
I
why this came up
but I'm
is
heavily obsessed with the first season, so I'm surprised at myself that I did not watch season 2.
I can't go back and watch season one. Lots of respect, but me looking at it as somebody who trains dancers, there's a lot of stuff in like
Oh no, there's a
that
bunch
frustrate
like
me.
there are a few people in my life that refuse to watch Cheer or have watched it only one time
I'm
because
pretty sure
they went through the trauma of just
we
cheerleading
had a
and or dance.
conversation about
We
this
I am
show in a previous
pretty sure.
episode.
Oh, 100% because I probably brought it
So
up.
if you're interested in our perspectives on this, you can go back and watch that. But the reason why, I'm sure some of you, if you know about the situation with Jerry Lewis and the, I mean, it really is just like pedophilia. Like that's
Yeah, it's point blank just
the
like there's
the
no
basis
if,
of all of
ands, or
it.
ors. Yeah.
If you're like the how is any of this relevant to what we're talking about? The if we look at the actions behind the actions is a very, I don't want to use the word broken because I don't think anybody has a full like picture, but it's a very disfigured mental state that comes from all of the stuff that we've talked about. You don't
Oh,
just,
his last name is Harris. I'm sorry. Like it
oh,
was bugging me.
oh, good. I'm happy you looked it up. I'm sorry. Jerry Lewis is an actor. Sorry, I typed that
Probably.
with it. My bad. You guys were talking about Jeremiah Harris. I am so sorry for totally ruining that. This is why we fact check Brittany. But do I am I happy that he's being held accountable? Yes. I think across the board we need more accountability in the world. We talk about that all the time here. But this is all relevant to the fact that your mental state and your mental health gets you to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much that was unaddressed and covered up. And if you go back and listen to the whole rant that I went on 20 minutes ago that I read from my phone that I had to speak out to Maria, this situation, and I don't know any of the details behind the psychology of it. I'm sure there's resources out there. I like all of that stuff. It is devastating and just not acceptable what happened to these children.
Mm-hmm.
Not talking anywhere on the stance of the actual issue of his action. I'm talking about if you go back to the mental health, all of the issues that we have around mental health awareness and the way we cover it up and sweep it under the rug and the way we don't create places for it to be addressed and the way we're not being proactive
Mm-hmm.
in molding minds. This is a direct example of that. And then you add in like what happens when we have famous people. And like there's an episode of Cheer that you're gonna watch where there's some like little girls like fangirling over the team.
Mm-hmm.
I had to literally stop watching because and you'll like there's a lot of that. You'll see exactly the moments that I'm talking about. Like it is so cringy to me that we do this.
Like idolize people
Mm-hmm.
to a point where it's like I don't even know what the word is, but yeah, cringy, I guess.
Especially when it's children. It's like a whole nother level.
Like children idolizing older
Oh, it's a
people,
whole
or
nother
like
level. And then again, it creates more of the space, and they talk about it in the. It creates more of this space.
it's a power trip,
Right.
is it not?
They talk the boys that were victimized that came forward to make this trial what it was.
Yeah,
Talk about that as an issue, and I totally see that being an issue.
I get that because it's harder, especially like if something happens and then the person that um is the perpetrator. I was trying to find the word. Becomes an icon, if you will. around even just like around your town or like, you know, nationally, internationally, whatever, it's harder to speak up because it's like you get a feeling of like, I don't want to be the person
Right.
to
Or
kill
like,
his vibe or whatever, you
and
know,
this
to like
this is a
kill his
general
career.
this is a general victim issue, right? Whether the
Correct. It's not like this isn't the one instant. It's literally
hmm
just like every instance possible. Even if it's
um
like not even like you're famous, it's more like you know this person around town is viewed as the a good person. Like that in
this was the
itself.
issue that I dealt with in high school, friend.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you
I mean
remember
like
this? Like
yeah, 100%.
you
No,
don't know what to
100%.
say or you don't know how to because
You don't know how to defend
an
yourself.
image. Yeah, when
Yeah,
someone has an
because
image or you have an image and it goes
yeah.
against it's a shitty
It
situation
created
to
a
be
lot
in.
of it was annoying
Right. It's a really
because I knew that whatever was spreading was completely
oh, but
false.
it doesn't no, but I was talking about the like when the other party had like such an amazing like
Yeah, but even when things were now this is personal, right?
this is
Like
not relevant. We don't
this
have to
isn't
talk about this because
irrelevant
this
at
is
all.
not important anymore. But I just to give like a not famous person example, if
Right, like someone had a reputation and people just the point of this right here, people just abided to whatever that person's reputation was and
yeah,
not the actual facts and
and
as opposed to
it's
fiction.
easy to do that. And when you have to come
Yeah.
out and be something that's against that, it's hard. And I don't want to. We don't
Yeah.
go into like the details of all of this, but what I was telling Maria that this is something that becomes super relevant in any form of like performing art or any type of art situation. um, there's a lot of lack of attention on it, and the thing that I think was wonderful going back to the accountability aspect um, is that first of all it's our society's fault, it's all of our faults that we let these mental issues get so big that people can take the actions to do these things before it's addressed. And it's not like it's like the fault of the people around them or like the fault of like it's all of our faults as like systems that are not educating or doing anything about it, because there's no one individual that can make a huge difference when it comes to mental health. It's the entire system that works to support. So just as like a race we kind of fall
Hmm.
on that, and COVID has really showed us that, oh boy, quite a bit. Anyway, but I think that this is a norm that's dangerous, and the accountability part, this issue becoming relevant in the world of cheer brought and surfaced a lot of underlying cover-ups and issues about people who are existing and successful within these realms and they're not doing good things, and people are like covering up shit for them.
Hmm.
And I've seen it firsthand and have experienced it
Hmm.
being in the dance world. And you don't know what to when something happens in the moment, you are so in shock that something has happened that you don't know how to respond, especially because we're not trained on how to respond and how to stand up and how to advocate or like what's okay and not okay. And especially in the world of the performing arts where you're physically all over each other, like the boundary lines get very blurry.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so, and I just had a conversation not too long ago as I'm working with the next generation of young performing artists where these things are still relevant, which again means that like the system is not doing its job. We're not doing our job. Um, and that level of abuse we could be talking about to the extent of like sexual interactions that are not appropriate or just like emotional traumatic interactions are just as much not appropriate, right? Trauma. It's a trauma. You're causing trauma to a not fully formed brain.
Yeah.
Um,
That doesn't know how to deal with that.
right. I don't freaking know how to deal with it now as like a 20
Right.
year old person. So this, all of this just really calls for the fact that we need to have more education and more boundaries to be able to, I mean, we saw it with the freaking gymnastics doctor. Like
Yeah.
we see it all the time and we bring
Yeah.
awareness to it, but like we're not changing anything. And it's just not acceptable. And I just as like a side note, I am now coming into a place in my life where I am a super big advocate for mental health and mental support for dancers because that's
Hmm.
my home.
Yeah.
But I'm also in the point of my life now where I'm just going to do it, period, and I'm going to talk about it. And if it makes other people uncomfortable, or it
That's
makes
not your
them like,
problem.
judge me, or it makes them want to like excommunicate me from the place where I always struggle with it is putting it into professional environments, because that's the place where the most stigmas really exist. We don't talk
Yeah,
about it enough.
correct.
I am just now getting to the point, and this is me talking on a good day, friends. I might be battling this tomorrow, but I'm just now getting to the point now where I realize like that's not a person I want to talk to then. That's not a community I want to be in. That's
Hmm.
the job that I'm meant to do.
Correct.
So that's what I'm going to be continuing to do. And that's going to be my intention behind all of the work that I do with like my Empower to Positive. Because I'm just so tired of the stigmas. I'm just
Yeah.
so tired of the like, oh, this happened again and this happened again. And like, oh, that person is crazy, or oh, that person doesn't like, no,
Yeah.
person's a person and they're doing the best they can. And if we keep seeing these continuous mofo potholes in the middle of the road that we call all this media attention to, but we're not addressing the foundations, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's redundant to keep saying this every episode that like things need to change and our systems suck.
Drive it
But
home.
that's just no, I think it's just it's the cards that were dealt with, and I do the same in my own personal life. Like mental health isn't like a stigma in my eyes, but it is for many people. But like I'm gonna keep talking about it and I don't give a fuck anymore. Because it's tiring. It's tiring to be a human, period.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also very tiring when you're a human dealing with mental illness, and like especially in a professional setting, like it's so like put that second and put your work first, but like I refuse to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just the awareness and the being a safe space for people is also like a thing that like people need to understand, and that other people need. Like
Yeah.
great for people that are mentally healthy. Like I don't know what that ever will be, but I know there are people like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I'm so
I
glad
don't
for
think
you.
I know a lot of them. But, so if you
Like
feel like you are someone who is like that and you'd like to come talk to us on this show, you totally should.
look, and like again, I could say that, but they could be dealing with shit and they just think that it's mentally healthy to live their life XYZ.
Which is
But which
most
is
people
most
in the world.
people.
But
But
we make that norm. We make that every.
exactly, whatever the norm is, and if you fit in that norm of like you go day in day out, work, deal with your shit, be healthy about it and all that stuff, whereas
Yeah.
many people are struggling even dealing with shit, good for you. But you should also be an ally to the mentally ill people,
Yeah,
because
and
there are people like that.
I think that that's something that we have to talk about too, is that
Hmm.
people who are dealing with any form of mental struggle or mental illness are not incapable. And
No, I'm a high functioning
yeah, well, I
depressed,
mean
anxious person.
that's
Like that's just
dangerous in its own way, and that we're gonna leave on the side. But I mean, like the the thought of you you deal with anxiety and depression, you shouldn't be a parent. You deal with anxiety and depression, you shouldn't be like
hmm
a CEO. You deal with anxiety and depression, you shouldn't be leading other people.
hmm
I think that that's a lot of what becomes like that issue with like professionalism and the way we lead our lives, like whether you
hmm
can or you can't. As I said before, and I will continue to say again and again, we are emotional creatures, and we're
hmm
all at some. I even if you a mentally healthy, like capable, stable person, like you're dealing with mental health. I don't like I will
hmm
never not believe that. Um, so I have days like I have a lot of days where I'm capable. I have days where my mental health is crap and I'm still super capable. Um, it's not a handicap. It's just the reality. You have a level of awareness of the fact that you're a person and you're dealing with life as a person. Um, it's funny that you bring up the I love everything that you just said about the like, I'm going to talk about it. I don't care. I have a friend who, well, she's like a colleague who is a dance therapist, and mental
Mm-hmm.
health is like her whole life. She's got all of these really awesome, like I have a pin and she gave me like this little bracelet that says mental health awareness on it. And I
Nice.
wear it with all of my other like bracelets. I wear it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I always, less and less now, but when I was first putting it on, I would be like, you wearing this is you wearing this. Like you're wearing a badge of saying, like, this is something that I deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so anybody can see it and they're going to think whatever they want to think. But I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because that's representing, and I can look down at it when the good thing that has been happening, I've been wearing it for like a month or two now, is that if I'm struggling with something and I look down at it, it reminds me like this is enough of a thing that like it's a movement and I have a freaking bracelet on. You know what I mean? To give
Yeah. Yeah.
a reality check. So I love that you said that. I think that we just need to like not uh it's I don't want to say not care because it's not possible for us to care, but like to not care. But if we want to see the change happen, we have to live as if it does exist already.
Correct. And I don't know what that's ever gonna look like
Yeah.
in the American life, but I mean, the hope is it'll get there someday.
Yeah, and there are amazing, and we can wrap it up with this.
Mm-hmm.
Maria and I talked about this literally less than 12 hours ago, so we don't have an influx of resources, but we can do more of that for you, and you might know better resources than we do, so please reach out to us on social media and let us know. But
Mm-hmm.
there are so many amazing foundations and advocacy groups that are believe in the things that we just talked about and are doing that work. So if you need a resource, they exist, and I know that there's one out there for you. Just off the top of my head, in the dance world, I know that there's this awesome organization called Minding the Gap that's talking about mental health for dancers. And I mean, this is sad that I don't know of like more right off the top of my head. Do you know of any off the top of your head?
So I've made it a point, and this isn't me gloating or doing anything, but as a big Harry Potter fan, and as everyone knows that J.K. Rowling is the worst type of human being in the world, despite her giving us the joy of Harry Potter, I've made it a point every year to donate to LGBTQ
Mm.
charities that deal with mental health specifically. Because I mean, it's also tied. The LGBTQ plus community and mental health kind of are tied because that's their day in day out. But the Trevor Project is a good one. I also donated to the Marsha P. Johnson Project, which specifically calls for help to New York City Black trans people. So those are two good ones. Also, like honestly, go on Facebook, honestly, and like the people that you probably are friends with, um, have things going on, and sometimes they have GoFundmes for their own mental states and mental beings or like whatever they're going through, and like that even will impact you at a more personal level, and you'll feel even more fulfilled and connected with mental health struggles if you are directly helping someone that you know.
Very true.
So that too. But
It's
I
like
mean,
a good problem that my brain is having right now in just like being like, this is the one that we should talk about or I want to tell you about because there are a lot more now.
there are a lot.
It's just that people have to find the ones that
Speak to
work
them.
for them, right? And I feel
There's
like I'm
Mhm.
happy you talked about it in the perspective that you did because you're talking about things that are relevant to you. Uh,
Correct. Like again, I didn't call these organizations out because I wanted to tell everyone
we're
in
not
the world.
necessarily endorsing them and being like, this is our.
Not even that. Like I don't even want to I personally don't like saying, "Oh, I donated to XYZ organization." Like I'm not that type of person. Some people are, and that's great because then that gets the word out. I just do it privately and like again, the Trevor Project and the Marsha P. Johnson Institute, I think is what they're officially called, are two that directly affect me
Right.
also liking and enjoying the Harry Potter series.
Mm.
And it's me giving back to the community saying like this sucks that this huge ass author is a prick and is still making billions of dollars off of this, like let me just give back to the community in some way so that
Mhm.
I don't, and it's not me feeling guilty being a Harry Potter fan. It's like more like
No.
I am an ally. I am whatever you want me to be. I hope this helps out with further mental health
No,
resources and
for
stuff.
sure. I don't think that, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. And like there are a bunch of other charities and organizations. I tend to gravitate more towards the BIPOCs, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, just because I know that struggle alongside mental health. Um, there I am friends with or colleagues or acquaintances with an Asian, they're called Asian Mental Health Collective. They're a national organization that deals with the AAPI community and the mental struggles. They've held conferences. They have resources available. So if you just Google them too, if you're in the AAPI community, they're a very good resource.
Yeah. I think that the best bet for people is to go to people that are in your community that you feel
Correct.
like you know and trust, and that you can get like, oh, sorry, my computer decided that it wanted to like start running a security scan, and now it's popping up. Um, Go to people that you know and trust, and that you feel like relate to you and your experiences. Like we just gave you good examples. Like I see a lot of this, a lot of a couple of my issues stemmed from me being a dance person. So I work in that realm. So a lot of my resources are connected to that, and Maria's are based on being a BIPOC. So like your best bet is to find somebody that relates to you and what works for you, and going and finding those resources, and
Yeah, and just figuring out where you think your resources can better help the community.
for sure.
Because I mean, money is temporary. Oh, but the help that you can give with your money is probably forever, honestly.
Amen. All right. Well, we were like, oh, this is going to be a heavy episode, but I think we did a good
It
job
was,
keeping it.
yeah.
I think it was informative. If you feel the same way, please let us know. Reach out, comment on liking, sharing, all of that good stuff. Um,
Hmm.
because we're here for you guys. We're going to talk about this, and we're just so glad that you're here with us.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
if you do need something, if there's something in your life relevant to therapy or community or any of those things, don't be afraid to go after it, because you deserve to live your best life, and you can be more than your mental health.
Okay, bye.